Pastor James was a figure of respect and admiration. He had built a life many envied, one filled with faith, purpose, and community. His church was a small but vibrant place where people gathered each week, seeking guidance and hope. James was known for his inspiring sermons, his calming presence, and his unwavering belief in the power of good. For years, he had been the shepherd to his congregation, leading them through life's storms with strength and compassion. At the center of James's life was his wife, Emily. To everyone who knew them, Emily seemed like the perfect partner, graceful, kind, and always by his side. She was actively involved in church events, helping with charity drives, and offering comfort to those in need. Together, they appeared to be a shining example of love and devotion. Their smiles, their shared moments in public, and their quiet tenderness seemed to confirm a deep, unshakable bond. Many saw their relationship as a symbol of what faith and love could achieve. But beneath the surface of this picture-perfect life, James felt a growing unease. Something inside him stirred quietly but persistently, a small voice of doubt and confusion he could neither ignore nor understand. He tried to push the feelings aside, focusing on his work and the responsibilities that demanded his attention. Yet, the uneasiness lingered, like a shadow at the edge of a bright day. He noticed subtle inconsistencies, small things that didn't quite add up, but he told himself to trust in the life he had built. James's faith was strong, yet even the strongest faith can be tested by the unknown. As days turned into weeks, the quiet anxiety within him grew louder, casting a veil over his thoughts. He began to question what he thought he knew, not only about Emily, but about the world around him. The church was meant to be a place of truth and light, but his own life was becoming a place of doubt and darkness. Despite this inner conflict, James kept up the appearance of normalcy. He smiled at his congregation, delivered his sermons with passion, and participated in every church activity as if nothing was wrong. Yet inside, he felt torn between the life he had promised to live and the secret that seemed to be unraveling everything. The man who once felt certain and unbreakable now found himself lost in a sea of confusion and fear. James's story was one of a man caught between two worlds, the one he had built with faith and love, and the one slowly revealing a hidden truth. In a community where appearances often mattered more than reality, he faced the challenge of reconciling what was with what he was only beginning to understand. The tension grew like a silent storm, waiting for the moment it would break. In this delicate balance of light and shadow, James's life was about to change forever. What seemed like a perfect life was only the beginning of a journey that would test everything he believed in, his faith, his love, and ultimately, himself. The discovery came unexpectedly, like a sudden crack in a glass that had long seemed unbreakable. One afternoon, while going through some old belongings, James found something he wasn't meant to see, a secret that changed everything he thought he knew about his wife, Emily. The truth was hidden in a small box tucked away in a drawer, a collection of papers and documents that revealed a life carefully concealed. James's heart pounded as he read the truth. Emily was not who she appeared to be. She was a man. The shock was immediate and overwhelming. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the revelation. For years, he had loved and trusted Emily, but now he felt as if everything had been a lie. The person he thought he knew so well was, in fact, someone else entirely. The secret was not just about identity, it was about betrayal. James's world began to unravel, and with it, his faith in everything around him. The discovery was like a storm that swept through his life, leaving destruction in its wake. He felt betrayed not only by Emily but also by himself. How could he have been so blind? How had he missed the signs? These questions haunted him endlessly. His heart ached with confusion and pain, and his mind struggled to hold on to the pieces of the life he once believed in. The church, the community, the future they had dreamed of, it all seemed to crumble beneath the weight of the truth. James found himself alone in a place he once thought was safe. The church, his sanctuary, felt cold and empty. The people who had looked up to him now seemed distant, their faces filled with curiosity and judgment he could not escape. The secret he carried was heavy, isolating him from the world he had devoted himself to serving. His faith, once a source of strength, became a source of torment as he questioned how such a truth could exist in the place of purity and honesty he had always preached about. In the silence of his home and the stillness of the empty church pews, James wrestled with his emotions. Anger, sorrow, confusion, and fear swirled within him, each feeling more intense than the last. The man who had once been a pillar of certainty now felt fragile and broken. The pain of betrayal cut deep, and the uncertainty of what to do next weighed heavily on his soul. Yet even in this dark moment, a small part of James longed to understand. He knew the secret was more than just a revelation about Emily, it was a challenge to his own beliefs and fears. It forced him to confront difficult questions about identity, love, and acceptance. The struggle was not just with Emily's truth but with his own ability to accept it. The days that followed were filled with silence and shadows. James withdrew from the community, seeking solitude in the church where his pain echoed against the walls. The revelation had shattered the life he had built, but it also marked the beginning of a difficult journey, one that would push him to find strength where he thought there was none, to face truth without turning away, and to discover whether forgiveness and healing were possible after such a deep wound. The storm inside James grew darker with each passing day. The pain and confusion he felt were overwhelming, and his heart became a battleground for emotions he could barely control. Anger burned fiercely, mixed with betrayal and deep sorrow. He struggled to reconcile the truth he had uncovered with the life he had cherished. The man he loved as Emily was no longer who he thought she was, and the church, his place of refuge, felt like a prison of judgment and silence. The pressure mounted, and James found himself slipping into despair. He could no longer hide the turmoil that raged within him. Each time he stepped into the church, he was reminded of the secret he carried, and the weight of it crushed his spirit. He felt trapped between two worlds, the faith he had dedicated his life to and the painful reality that challenged everything he believed. His mind grew restless, filled with dark thoughts that clouded his judgment. The community around James watched with concern as the once strong and steady pastor changed. Whispers began to spread, and people wondered what had caused the shift. Some remained loyal, offering prayers and support, while others kept their distance, unsure how to confront the tragedy unfolding before them. The church was no longer just a place of worship, it had become a place of silent tension and quiet fear. One day, overcome by the turmoil, James made a decision that shocked everyone. In a moment of uncontrollable rage and despair, he acted out violently within the very walls of his church. The act was sudden and devastating, shattering the peace he had once worked so hard to build. The sanctuary became the scene of tragedy, a place where faith and hope were overshadowed by pain and loss. The consequences of that day rippled through the community. Families were broken, friendships strained, and the church doors closed temporarily as everyone grappled with the shock. People questioned how a man devoted to spreading love and kindness could fall so far into darkness. The headlines spread quickly, turning James's story into a public tragedy that no one could ignore. But beneath the surface of the violence and heartbreak was a deeper human story, one of a man overwhelmed by grief, betrayal, and confusion. James was not simply a villain, he was a person broken by secrets and fear. His actions were born from a desperate place, a moment where pain overtook reason and faith faltered under unbearable weight. In the days following the tragedy, James was left alone to face the consequences of his choices. The church was silent. And the world outside moved forward, but James's soul was trapped in the past, haunted by the events he could never undo. His faith had been tested beyond measure, and the journey ahead was uncertain and steep. Though the darkness seemed endless, it was also the beginning of a turning point, a moment that would force James to confront himself, to seek understanding, and to search for a path back from the edge. It was a painful reminder that even in the depths of despair, the possibility of healing and redemption still exists, waiting for those willing to find it. After the tragic day that changed everything, James found himself alone with his thoughts and the weight of what had happened. The church that had once been full of life and joy now stood silent, a reminder of the pain and loss that had fractured the community. James was left with no choice but to face the consequences of his actions and the storm inside him. In the quiet solitude, James began a long and difficult process of reflection. The path was not easy. Every day brought new questions and challenges. He wrestled with feelings of guilt, shame, and regret. The man he had been, the strong pastor who guided others, felt like a distant memory. What remained was someone broken, searching for answers in a world that suddenly seemed cold and unforgiving. James realized that he could no longer run from the truth or bury his pain beneath anger and confusion. To heal, he had to look deeper, to understand not only the secret that had shattered his life but also his own reactions and beliefs. This meant confronting the fears and prejudices he hadn't acknowledged before. It meant accepting that love and identity are not always simple or easy to understand. Slowly, James began to see that the secret he had discovered was more complex than he had imagined. Emily's truth was part of a larger story, one about courage, survival, and the search for acceptance in a world that often judged harshly. This new understanding didn't erase the pain, but it offered a glimpse of compassion where once there had only been anger. During this time, James reached out for help. He sought counseling and spoke with others who had faced similar struggles, learning that he was not alone. Many people carried wounds invisible to the outside world, and healing required both honesty and forgiveness. Through this process, James began to rebuild a fragile sense of peace within himself. The church community, too, began to slowly open their hearts. Some members struggled to forgive, but others showed surprising grace and support. They listened to James's story, not just as a pastor but as a man who had fallen and was trying to rise again. The journey toward healing was slow and uneven, but it was real. James's faith evolved during this time. It no longer meant certainty or judgment but became a source of strength in vulnerability and openness. He learned that forgiveness starts with oneself and that redemption is possible, even after the darkest mistakes. His sermons changed, reflecting the lessons he had learned about compassion, truth, and the complexity of human lives. Though the scars of the past remained, James found hope in the future. He dedicated himself to helping others who felt lost or broken, turning his pain into purpose. The church reopened its doors, not as a place of perfection, but as a refuge for those seeking healing and understanding. James's story became one of courage and transformation, a powerful reminder that even in the aftermath of tragedy, it is possible to find light. It showed that when faced with the hardest truths, the human spirit can choose to forgive, grow, and begin again. Time moved forward, though the memories of that day remained etched in the hearts of everyone who had been touched by the tragedy. James, no longer the man he once was, continued walking a road that demanded strength, humility, and an open heart. The church he had once led with certainty now became a place of quiet reflection and honest conversations. It no longer promised easy answers but offered something far more powerful, understanding without conditions. As weeks turned to months, James began to share his journey publicly. Not to excuse what had happened, but to help others avoid the same path of silence, confusion, and internalized fear. He spoke not as a preacher standing above others, but as a flawed man who had been brought to his knees by his own inability to face the truth. His words resonated with people from all walks of life. Those who had been hiding their identities. Those who had been hurt by religion. And those who had made terrible mistakes and wondered if they could ever be forgiven. James told them what he had learned the hard way, that real faith doesn't come from pretending to be perfect, but from facing what's broken and choosing to rebuild. He admitted his fears and failures. He spoke about Emily, not as a lie, but as a human being who had lived with courage despite the risks. He acknowledged the damage his actions had caused, not only to Emily's memory but to the trust of the community. And he didn't ask for sympathy. He only asked for the chance to use what remained of his life to serve differently. Eventually, the church became something new. It was no longer centered around a perfect image of leadership, but around a shared sense of humanity. People who had once felt judged by religion now found a place at the table. Services began to include stories of recovery, identity, and reconciliation. The stained glass windows no longer just reflected the past, they captured the new light coming in, fragile but real. James continued to carry the burden of his past, but he also carried something else: purpose. He traveled to speak with other communities, especially those struggling with